Let's dive in and take a look at the different transaction types within the project management and accounting module. AX supports 5 different transaction types throughout the project management and accounting module. And if you look at the table that I have displaying right now, you can see that we have hours, items, expenses, fees, and on accounts. And transaction types to me, they basically mean a grouping of business documents. I can give you some examples of methods to use each transaction type. So for hours, it's basically the labor that you're going to consume upon any project, and some examples of that would be consulting labor or labor that goes into installing something or set up any type of labor where you're consuming hours. Items, this can be a little tricky topic because items and expenses can sometimes be interchangeable, but typically items reflect materials that you're consuming to a project or any subcontracted services. And we'll get into the business documents that actually reflect an item type transaction inside of the project module here shortly. Expenses are basically any type of expense that you're booking to a project, whether it's airfare, hotels, parking. And I know some people think of materials as just being an expense, so why isn't that the transaction type expense? And this is where it gets into transaction types are really groupings of business documents within AX. So let's move on to fees. Fees are basically any sort of transaction that has no cost associated with it. So they're used with time and material type projects. And you can think of a few examples of for fees would be like a service fee or some type of deliverable. So we meet a specific date, we get a $5,000, we can charge you for a $5,000 fee. Then we have surcharges as well. On accounts are kind of the oddball transaction type, and on accounts are typically prepayments on time and material projects or schedule payments for fixed price projects. So I know I've said a couple times already that transaction types are really business document groupings, and this is the way that I look at it in AX is basically when I'm posting through a specific business document or journal, here's the transaction type that I'm hitting or using. So if we look at hours, we can see that we have timesheets and hours journals. Those are the ways that you can use the hour transaction type. And then if you're going to post items in the system, it's basically any document that requires an item number. So I should clarify that any document that requires an item number and is integrated with the project module. So a purchase order, a sales order, a production order, item journal, an item requirement journal, or not journal, just an item requirement, which is basically like a sales order, and AP invoice. So then we get down to expenses, and the way to consume expenses to a project would be through an expense report, an AP invoice journal. Notice the difference between an AP invoice and an AP invoice journal. There is a difference. Then there's general journals and project expense journals. And then finally, fees. You can post fees to a project through a fee journal. And then with on accounts is there's not a journal or really a business document. Basically, you open a form and then you build out your payment schedule. And then there's another way of creating an on account too, and that's by using the customer advance feature, which we'll get into in subsequent modules. So the way that I'd like you to look at transaction types are the different, first they're the different ways of posting transactions, and then understand which ways, which business documents are part of each transaction type. So transaction types are something that you should have a good general understanding of, because when you get into setting up the product, you'll see them referenced in different areas, such as setting up categories. Or, when you're just looking at the posted project transaction form, it shows the transaction type as well. So understanding what business documents that go with each transaction type can be valuable to make good business decisions and good implementation decisions.